All right. We've already seen, Christine just walked in. I want to ask if Jimmy did his homework. You guys remember the homework assignment I gave to Jimmy? Did he do his homework? He did? Where is he? Is he going to report on it? Jimmy. Okay, when he gets here, I will turn the mic over. I want to hear Jimmy's homework assignment. All right, we've already met Jonathan back in chapter 14. When Jonathan and his armor bearer went up into the garrison of the Philistines, and they killed several Philistine soldiers, and did that during the time that Saul had given this rash oath, and no one's going to eat any food until all the Philistines are defeated, and just a foolish thing to say, jeopardizing his entire army's well-being and even that of his own son. We've already seen Jonathan as this strong character, seemingly man of great faith. He is ready to go and attack this Philistine garrison, just him and his armor bearer, just the two of them, and they're going to take it on, and they believe that God is with them. Jonathan, you'll remember, said, the Lord can save by many or by few, right? So Jonathan has a strong faith. But Jonathan is also David's best friend. And it says in chapter 18 and verse 1 that it came about when he had finished speaking to Saul that the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as himself. In verse 3, it says that same expression again. Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Verse 4 says that Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David with his armor, including his sword and bow and belt. Don't you think Jonathan's robe was probably a special one, given that he's the son of the king, right? And so Jonathan now bestows these things upon David. He loves David. They are very close. And a lot of people have, I think, incorrectly taken this and tried to turn this into some kind of, homosexual relationship between Jonathan and David. There's just nothing there, okay? There's nothing there that indicates that's what's going on. These are just two really good kindred spirit friends, and they have a very close bond. And I suspect that you have someone in your life who is like that. If you don't, it would be great if you did. If you had someone who was this close to you, someone that you looked at as a brother or a sister who is this close to you that you can share things with and confide in and speak freely with and so forth. Jonathan and David have a great friendship. But this friendship is going to be tested because of Jonathan's father, Saul. Saul is going to, in the next several chapters, go on this campaign where he is trying to get rid of David. And we will see that a few different times today, but is also in the chapters to come. David is very successful in whatever he is doing. He has just defeated Goliath back in chapter 17. In chapter 18 and verse 5, David went out wherever Saul sent him, and he prospered, or he was successful. And so Saul set him over the men of war. Everything David does is successful. So if you're King Saul and you have this servant who everything he touches turns to gold, wouldn't it be smart to say, you know what, I'm going to let him touch more things. I'm going to put him over more things, give him more responsibility. And everything that David does goes well. And that's because the Lord is with him. So in chapter 18 and verse 5, the second half of the verse, it says, and it was pleasing in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. The whole nation sees that everything David does goes well. And so all the nation gets behind David. Hey, we really like this guy. Even the other servants in Saul's house see that David has this honored position, but man, he deserves it. Everything he does goes really well. And so everybody is in support of David rising through the ranks. So chapter 18 and verse 6, it happened as they were coming when David returned from killing the Philistine, so that's Goliath, chapter 17, that the women came out of all the cities of Israel singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines, with joy, and with musical instruments. The women sang as they played and said, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. Uh-oh. Wait a minute. Notice it says that all the women of Israel came out to see whom? They came out to see King Saul, it says. But when they sang their song, who did they give more praise to? Saul has now been, what's the term? Upstaged by this lesser figure. I mean, he's the king. David's the servant, and yet David is the one who's getting all the attention. David's in the spotlight and not him. And so in verse 8, Saul became very angry, for this saying displeased him. This thing became a saying. So people are going around, it seems more than just one time, saying, Saul has killed thousands, but David has killed 10,000s. Now, literally, that's not true, is it? I mean, Saul literally has killed thousands. David has not killed tens of thousands. But man, he sure killed that big guy. He killed the one that all the army of Israel, including King Saul, was scared of. David's killed more than that, but it's not been tens of thousands. But man, David has been there when it mattered. And David is the one that's getting all the attention now. And so Saul is angry about this. He says in verse 8, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, but to me they've only ascribed thousands. Now what more can he have but the kingdom? Isn't there some irony in what Saul says in that question? What, am I just going to give this guy the kingdom? Well, yeah, actually you are. You may not know that yet. You may not be privy to all the things that David is. But yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. And so in verse 9, Saul looked at David with suspicion from that day on. Now, Saul has these suspicious thoughts about David. This guy's undermining me. He's getting more attention. People love him more than they love me. Everybody's singing his praises. And this jealousy is going to create problems for Jonathan and David. Jonathan is going to remain true to David throughout, but this is going to become a source of conflict in Jonathan's life. His father wants him to do one thing, but he wants to do another because David is his friend. Okay. So chapter 18 and now verse 10. It came about on the next day that an evil spirit from God came mightily upon Saul, and he raved in the midst of the house, while David was playing the harp with his hand as usual. And a spear was in Saul's hand. We've talked about this already, this evil spirit that came from God, and we've said some things about that already, but David is there in Saul's house playing music because, as we've already seen, that soothes Saul's spirit. When he becomes angry and restless and anxious, David plays music and it calms Saul down. But there's something interesting that is said at the end of verse 10. It says that a spear is in Saul's hand. Now, where is Saul? Did you notice that as we read verse 10? Where is he? He's at home. When I'm sitting in my house, do you know what's not in my hand? My 12 gauge. It's not in my hand. It's in my house, but it's not in my hand. Okay? Now, one of these days when Kinley shows up with a boy, it might be in my hand. But right now, it's nearby, but I'm not holding it. Why is Saul sitting in his house with a spear in his hand? I don't know the answer to that other than to say his mental state is probably not in a good place. Wayne?
I was going to say, I think a lot of what we're talking about now points back to the time when Saul was first chosen, when Saul did not feel worthy. There's something in Saul's character that makes him, if you will.
Oh, that's interesting. So you think maybe there's an insecurity that he feels? Okay, that's interesting. I heard a voice back here. Who was that? Josh? Maybe he was cleaning it? Yeah, right. That might be the only reason that a 12 gauge would be in my hand in my house, is I'm cleaning it. I don't know that spears need that kind of care, though. So, all right, so Saul is clearly in an unstable place, but David is playing music trying to calm him down. But this doesn't calm him down this time. Verse 11, Saul hurled the spear, for he thought, I will pin David to the wall. But David escaped from his presence twice. Saul throws the spear at David, trying to at least hurt him, if not kill him. Pin him to the wall, after it goes through his chest. So Saul, verse 12, was afraid of David, for the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. And so David escapes from Saul's hand twice, it says here. Should we assume that when it says he escaped from Saul's hand twice, that both times Saul threw the spear, or was there something else that Saul? I don't know that. He's going to throw the spear at David again, as we'll see in just a little bit. But Saul is clearly not in a good place, and David, verse 14, is prospering in everything because the Lord was with him. And when Saul, verse 15, saw that David was prospering greatly, he dreaded David. But all Israel and Judah loved David. And he went out and he came in before them. He was having influence among the people. He's going in and out. He's moving about freely. People are interacting with him. Everybody respects David. And yet Saul is troubled. Okay, anything about this before we move on to Saul's other plans to take David? Matt?
Sure. You could see it in politics, you could see it perhaps in a church setting. The irony to me is that Saul was prospering in theory because David was prospering. The more David did, the better that was for Saul, but all Saul could think of was that jealousy.
Okay, good. And let's remember this. We talked about this in the early days of Saul. When Saul had just become the king, we saw several times the Lord was with Saul. The Spirit of the Lord came upon Saul. God was with him in the early days. Why? Because Saul was doing what God wanted him to do. He was being obedient to God. And when Saul obeyed the Lord was with him. But when Saul stopped obeying the Lord departed from him. Why is the Lord with David now? Because David's doing what God wants him to do. Right? Let's make sure we see that connection. Lance and then Bryce.
I think one reason Saul might be afraid of David is that it's symbolic of him kind of being afraid of God now. Like, rather than Saul seeing David be like, hey, maybe I should do more what David's doing, he just gets mad at him and jealous of him, and in turn that gets him further away from God and deeper into his insanity, basically.
Okay, good. Bryce?
I was thinking along the same lines of Saul's fear. I mean, a lot of these passages in like Samuel, Kings, Chronicles is about conquering nations, even a little bit before this. And David and Saul are both courageous against the enemy. But when you look at their friends and their people and God, there's very different things they fear in regards to that. I mean, chapter 15, Saul was afraid that people didn't obey God because of that. And then the chapter we didn't read, 17, everybody's afraid of Goliath, but David, because he fears God.
Right.
And there's definitely, that's one of the biggest things we see.
Good.
The lesson of courage we're can somewhat draw from this is it's not necessarily about being afraid of our enemies. We can both be courageous against our enemies, but are we afraid of God or are we afraid of our friends?
Okay.
They think of us.
Yeah, good. Go ahead.
Since Saul was appointed as king by God, did he not think to inquire of the prophet or talk to God somehow, say, what can I do to make things better, or,
That's a great question. And early on, he did have those interactions with Samuel. But at this point, I don't recall reading of those inquiries, right? And man, what happened? Yeah. It's all about just me now, and I'm going to do this on my own. I don't have to inquire of the Lord. And I mean, surely you would think Saul would say, I need to talk to the Lord about this. Let me go find Samuel, and let's talk about why are things going off the tracks so poorly. But we don't read of him doing that. That's a great observation. So do you think there's a sense in which Saul, I know he's jealous of David. Yes, that's clear. But might Saul be jealous and angry about David because David's behavior is condemning Saul's behavior and he knows it? Right? Think about that for a moment. So I'm going to get upset with David because God's with David. Yeah, but why is God with David? Well, because David's obeying God and he's doing what God wants him to do. You know, the way that he used to be with me when I was obeying God, but now he's not with me anymore. And so David's obedience condemns my own disobedience. And so really, maybe Saul is feeling condemned because he knows David is doing what he's not doing. Right? You see that? And I think that's something that we need to think about. So the preacher gets up and preaches a sermon that steps all over my toes. And then I turn away and I say, man, I really don't like that preacher. Now, wait a minute. Is it that we don't like the preacher as a person? Or is it that what the preacher said hit me square between the eyes and I don't like that? Is my issue with the preacher or is it with what the scripture says, right? And I think that might be part of what's going on here with Saul. Is his issue really with David? Or is it he knows that David is proving him to be wrong? And he doesn't like that. I think there might be some of that here too. Alan?
When Saul was sent to destroy the Amalekites and failed, Samuel told him very clearly, God has rejected you from being king. That has to be in his mind as he sees David rising and things are going
Sure.
for him.
Yes.
It has to be in his mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, really good.
Dan, do you think he could have felt that the Spirit of the Lord had left him? And, I mean, I've always been, I guess it kind of troubles me a little bit back in 16 where it talks about when God sent these evil spirits.
Right.
So, and I know God can control those, but I just never thought
Yeah.
God sending evil spirits.
Yeah, so that's an interesting, like we could build an entire class or two on that alone, but there is this.
Verse 2 says the same thing.
Yes, yeah, that it came from the Lord. The distressing spirit came from the Lord. So the scripture does talk about in a number of places. 1 Kings 22 is an example, but also 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, a New Testament passage, does talk about God sending deluding or deceiving spirits to people. And I think the idea, if we boil it down to simplicity, is God will let someone take the path that they want to take. And if they wish to just continue in a delusion, he will let them do that, okay? And so I don't think that we need to walk away from this thinking, well, God, you know, Saul was doing great, but then God changed his mind and he forced Saul to go down this wrong path. Saul started going down the path, and I think it's almost like God says, okay, if that's what you want to do, I'm not going to stop you. I'll let you do that. And if you want to keep being deceived, I will let you do that, okay? I know that's like a really brief answer to a big question. But your original question was, did Saul feel, you know, the Spirit of the Lord leave him and go to David? I think all of these episodes of his seeming mental anxiety and mental issue, I think that's a part of the answer to that. Yes, I think he did notice that, you know, not only the Spirit of God is not with him, but knowing he has God's approval and the peace that would come along with that, I'm obeying the Lord, I'm with the Lord, he's with me, he's not feeling that anymore. And so, yeah, I think that's part of, you know, did he know? Yeah, I think so. Does that help? A little bit? All right, that's a big topic. Maybe Joe should preach a sermon on that soon. Okay, all right. So let's move on now. Chapter 18, and let's look at another. So Saul is not able. Okay, Corey, go ahead.
Is it not fall under the same umbrellas like God's heart and Pharaoh's heart?
Yeah, it's very much related to that. Yes.
It's not like he really truly went down there and just made his heart full of stone. It's the fact that Saul's his mind's wandering, his doubt is there, his spirit is left.
Right. Yes, yes. Yeah, I don't want us to think about, if maybe I could use this illustration. I don't know if this is helpful. It's right off the cuff. It seems to be helpful in the moment. Don't think of your heart, your mind, having these, wires and controls and knobs in there, and God, against your own will, goes into your heart and starts adjusting the knobs and says, hey, I know Ben is really trying to be obedient and serve me and faithful to me, but I'm going to turn this knob and change that. I don't think that's what it is. This is not something that's happening against Saul's will. He's choosing a path. And then the Lord sends people like Samuel and says, hey, Saul, what are you doing? You need to turn this around. And yet Saul continues on this path. And so the Lord sends Samuel again, and Saul continues on the path. And I think finally God just washes his hands of it and says, look, if this is what you want, I'm going to let you do it. Okay? All right, if you want to push the analogy, maybe that's one way to do it. All right, so Saul either doesn't have good aim with the spear, or he just can't hit David. The Lord's protecting David. So now we got to come up with another way to get David and to trap him. And so Saul comes up with this plan. Verse 17, Saul said to David, here's my older daughter Merab. I will give her to you as a wife. Only be a valiant man for me and fight the Lord's battles. And then it tells us why Saul is doing this. His motivation is, my hand shall not be against him, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him. You know what? If I can't kill David myself, because obviously the Lord is protecting him from me, maybe I can let the Philistines kill David, and I can get rid of him in that way. So David, look at my beautiful daughter, my oldest daughter. She's ready to marry. Don't you think she's pretty? Wouldn't you like to be married to her? But David refuses. He says in verse 18, who am I that I should be the king's son-in-law? So he refuses. She gets a little bit older, and she then marries someone in verse 19. So attempt to marry David into the family, number one, does not work. Now in verse 20, Saul's other daughter, she loves David. Verse 20 says, and so apparently servants go to Saul and say, hey, look, we know you tried to marry off your first daughter, but that didn't work. But what about this one? She actually loves David, and this could be an arrangement that's going to work for you. And Saul agrees to this. And so he says in verse 21, he gives David this opportunity. And then David is told in verse 25, say this to David. This is what Saul tells the servants. The king does not desire any dowry from you except 100 foreskins of the Philistines to take vengeance on the king's enemies. Now Saul planned to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. We're once again told what Saul's motive is. Maybe the Philistines will remove him for me, and I can get rid of him, and he will no longer be a thorn in my side. David, all you have to do is kill 100 Philistines and bring me the foreskins of the soldiers. Kind of an awkward request, right? But that is what Saul demands. And so David, verse 27, rose up, he and his men, and struck down 200 men of the Philistines. He doubles what Saul asks. And so Saul gives him his daughter. A lot of people say Michal, I don't know, Michal. I've heard all kinds of different things. Whatever you say, I'm not going to judge you for it, so long as you don't judge me for it. Saul gives her to David as a wife. But again, he's hoping. I mean, think about it. What are the odds that David can go kill 100 Philistine soldiers? Not very good. He will not survive this. Sure, you can marry my daughter if you go through with this successfully. Yeah, absolutely, you can have her. No way he's going to do it. He killed how many Philistines? What? Are you kidding me? I didn't think he'd be able to kill 100. He's killed 200. Again, everything David touches turns to gold. He's got the golden goose. He is the golden goose, right? All right. So, end of the chapter. Verse 30 says, David's name was highly esteemed. This is a summary slide of everything that we've read in chapter 18. Verses 1 through 4, Saul's son, Jonathan, loves David. All of the people of Israel see the success of David. In verse 5, they believe that David should be the commander of the army. The women in Israel are singing praises to David. Everything David touches, he is successful in. The entire nation loves David. The Lord was with David. Saul's daughter loves David. Everybody loves David, except Saul, who is angry, who is jealous, who wants to kill David. He comes up with schemes and plots to try to get rid of David. This is an incredible contrast in chapter 18. David can do no wrong in the eyes of anyone except Saul. But even Saul knows that what David is doing is right. All right, Arlene.
You mentioned that for the dowry, I want to say, for David to become Saul's son-in-law, that David was humble. I understand David. It says that David was humble and saying, "I don't know. I'm a poor man. I can't do this." And Saul, being vindictive, said, "Well, then give you that 100." But I think David was like, "All right,
She can't say it.
I got this. I got this. You didn't go, "Oh no, I can't do this."
Right.
He said, "I got it."
And I'll double it. Yeah.
So that's the point I wanted to bring across. Is David was very confident. He knew the Lord was going to be with him.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and I just think Saul is thinking, though, this is an easy way for me to get rid of David. Right? And yet it turns out to be quite the opposite. David says, I'll do you one better. I'll double what you asked. Right?
You look at the life of Saul at this point, and you think, like, this doesn't make any sense. This is not logical. His thought processes are not logical. And of course they're not. He's eaten up with jealousy. And you think about, where does that come from? We're seeing this week the fruits of the Spirit with the kids over and over and over again.
It's not a coconut.
Jealousy is not a fruit of the Spirit.
Right.
Jealousy is the flesh.
That's right.
And so, maybe this is a warning for us. Jealousy can eat us up. Jealousy can make us become illogical. Jealousy takes us away from this fruit of the Spirit. We think about this Spirit of God being removed from Saul. Well, of course it was. He was living by the flesh.
Right.
How could the fruit of the Spirit be in Saul?
Yeah.
It wouldn't work.
That's right. And of course, this is not limited to jealousy, right? Any of those works of the flesh can drive out these good things.
This
Yeah.
is what was tearing up Saul, was his jealousy.
Right.
And it ruled his life. Don't think it can't happen to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah?
And it's sad and interesting, too, that jumping way ahead, that later we're actually going to see David use this exact same tactic successfully in his case.
That's right. With Uriah.
And
Yeah. How can I get rid of this problem? Let me send him to the enemy in battle. Yeah, the exact same tactic. That's right. Okay, I saw a hand over here. Oh, Donna.
Didn't Saul owe David a wife anyway? Why did he even have to pay that one?
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. And I don't know that maybe Saul is just saying, I know this is customary. I won't even require that from you. I don't need it anyways. The way you could really help me, David, is if you killed some of my enemies. That would really be a help to me. Why don't you do that instead?
But he did.
But again, he's plotting, this is going to kill David. That's what Saul's thinking.
But I mean, he owed him a wife anyway.
Saul's not exactly a man of integrity right now. So maybe that's all it is. But yeah, you're right. He even says in chapter 17, hey, if anybody defeats Goliath, I won't make you pay property taxes ever again. I mean, that would have been enough for me to try to, I would have gone for that.
As Sarah said over there, like David using this tactic for Uriah later, and then later, even on Kings, Ahab does this with also Midian. But each time, God judges him. Even though something else actually killed him, the person who initiated it from behind is just as guilty. And I think that for the teachers in this class, we need to make sure
Yeah, sure. Conspirators, complicit in the action. Yeah, okay, good. All right. Chapter 19. Saul's going to try to kill David. Again, imagine that. Nothing is going right for Saul. Everything's going right for David. God is clearly with David. And so Saul is going to become even bolder in his hatred towards David. In chapter 19, he goes to his son Jonathan. In verse 1, it says, Jonathan greatly delighted in David. But Saul told his son and all of his servants to put David to death. Now here's where Jonathan gets caught up in this conflict. My dad is telling me to kill my best friend. My dad is wrong in this. David's not done anything wrong. He knows that. So Jonathan goes to David in verse 2 and says, Saul, my father, is seeking to put you to death. And David says, yeah, I know. So Jonathan says, please be on the guard in the morning and stay in a secret place and hide yourself. And he's going to work out an arrangement where he will take care of David and protect him. He will work along with the Lord in protecting David. Saul's jealousy increases, and Jonathan pleads to his father on behalf of David. In verse 4, he says, do not let the king sin against his servant David. He has not sinned against you. And since his deeds have been very beneficial to you. David has done nothing to you that was wrong. And it is wrong for you to want to take his life. So don't do this. And so in verse 6, Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan, and he vowed, as the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death. Saul vowed. Okay, let's remember that, because he's not going to remember that. But he promises Jonathan, he vows to the Lord, I will not put David to death. Now, verse 7, David comes back into Saul's presence because this vow has been given, and now everything is presumably safe for a time. Verses 8 through 13, David is going to continue fighting in the military battles against the Philistines and defeating them and being successful. Now in verse 9, there was an evil spirit from the Lord on Saul as he was sitting in his house with his spear in his hand. Hey, we've seen this before. Once again, he's cleaning his spear. And David's playing the harp, and Saul throws the spear at him again. But he slipped away out of Saul's presence so that the spear stuck into the wall. David fled and escaped that night. Now, in verses 11 through 17, David's wife, Saul's daughter, so now another child of Saul, is being brought into this conflict. You need to kill your husband. He's my husband. He's not done anything wrong to you. And so Michal is going to help her husband David escape from the clutches of her father. And so Saul comes to her in verse 17, why have you deceived me like this and let my enemy go so that he has escaped? And she said to Saul, he said to me, let me leave. Why should I put you to death? So David fled and went to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and stayed in Naioth. All right, here's where Samuel comes back into the picture. Glenn, this is to your point earlier. Why doesn't Saul go and inquire of Samuel and ask, why are things going so poorly? Where does David go? He goes to Samuel. Okay, that's a good question. And I thought somebody might bring that up. And I decided that if it was brought up, I was going to skip it. So, moving on. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so part of the plan to help David escape is, Michal takes this household idol, stuffs it in the bed, and situates the bed, puts some goat's hair out to make it look like, I think it was goat hair, is that right? And makes it look like, David's sick in the bed. And when Saul's servants come, they kind of, oh yeah, okay, he's sick in the bed. All right. Why is that idol there in the first place? I don't know the answer to that. I really don't. And anything I could offer would be speculation. I wish I had something more to say that was helpful. It does. Yeah, it does. But I just don't know. I'm open to suggestions. It could be. Yeah, I don't know of any translation that renders it as statue, but I know that word can be used for that. I'm not sure. But it's a good question. I just don't know the answer, Glenn. So, David flees to Samuel, and he tells Saul everything that's going on. Word is now going to get out that that David has gone to Samuel, and so Saul pursues him there. And in fact, 3 times Saul is going to send servants to Samuel in hopes that he can bring David out. 3 times he sends messengers to go and get David. But each time they go, the servants are overcome by the Spirit of God, and they begin prophesying. It seems that there is maybe a school for prophets here that Samuel is kind of the headmaster of. And so these servants of Saul go to this school of the prophets, and then they just start prophesying. And, well, where are those servants I sent? Why aren't they back yet? I'm going to send a second detachment of servants, and then a third. And then Saul himself goes, all right, I'm going to go find out what's going on. He himself goes. He is overcome by the Spirit of God. He begins prophesying. What is going on here? Something very uncharacteristic is going on. And notice it says at the end of chapter 19, the people are again saying, is Saul also among the prophets? You remember that was brought up in chapter 10? They're saying that again. This is very uncharacteristic for the king to be doing this. Why is Saul acting like this? Okay, yet again, this is a way that God is protecting David. We skipped over Psalm 59, but there's very good reason to think Psalm 59 was written in this time of David's life. So take a look at that if you haven't already, and thank you very much for your participation this morning.
Is Jimmy off the hook?
Yeah.